Don't talk. Black waitress saved billionaire CEO in restaurant after spotting something shocking. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It was a typical busy evening at the upscale Waitress lounge in San Francisco, a place known for its luxury and elegance. The kind of restaurant where everything from the polished silverware to the hand-picked wines screamed exclusivity. A place where the city's wealthiest came to dine, converse, and flex their status. The room buzzed with quiet chatter, the soft clink of glasses, and the faint hum of jazz playing in the background. But amid all the glitz and glamour, one thing was different this evening. Cassandra, a black waitress in a simple uniform, moved quietly among the tables, offering water, taking orders, and doing her best to remain invisible. She had worked at Waitress for several years, but no matter how well she did her job, she was always treated as less than. Her skin, her background, these were the things people saw before they saw her skills or kindness. Cassandra was used to it. She had learned to become a shadow, blending into the background. But tonight, the shadow would soon step into the spotlight. The evening was going smoothly until a commotion broke out at one of the tables. Richard Kessler, a billionaire tech mogul known for his sharp suits and sharper business moves, had arrived. The room turned slightly colder with his presence, as it always did when the ultra-wealthy entered. But tonight, Richard was distracted. His face, usually full of confidence, was marred with worry, his eyes darting around as if searching for something or someone. His attention wasn't on the dinner he had come for, nor on the guests around him. It was all on the food. He had ordered a delicate dish, a rare delicacy flown in from Japan, but something about it seemed off. Richard's gaze flicked nervously between the plate and the staff, and Cassandra noticed the unease in his movements. She had seen it before, wealthy patrons, who, despite their status, were afraid of being made a fool of in front of others. Cassandra had learned to read people like a book. As she passed by, she overheard the whispers between Richard and his business associates. "Does he even know what he's eating?" One of them muttered with a laugh, and Richard's shoulders tensed, his lips curling in discomfort. Cassandra continued her rounds, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The storm outside raged on, and the air in the restaurant grew thick with tension. As Cassandra made her way past Richard's table again, she noticed something odd. The way he was breathing, shallow, rapid, his eyes widening slightly, as if he had just seen something that sent a chill down his spine. He suddenly looked ill, a pale hue spreading across his face. It was then that Cassandra realized what was happening. Richard Kessler was being poisoned. The signs were unmistakable, the slight twitch of his hands, the rapid breathing, and the color draining from his face. In a moment of clarity, Cassandra made a decision. She couldn't let him die like this, not in her restaurant, not after everything she had silently endured. She walked up to his table, but instead of saying anything immediately, she leaned in and placed a hand on his arm. Richard looked up at her, panic in his eyes, but she just gave him a steady, calm look. "Don't talk," she whispered quietly. He stared at her, confused, his lips parting to say something, but Cassandra quickly took action, signaling the chef and instructing him to dispose of the dish immediately. The staff moved swiftly, and in that moment, Cassandra became the only person in the room who truly saw the danger Richard was in. As Cassandra quietly stood by Richard's side, her mind raced. She had acted quickly, but now there was no time to waste. The man, the billionaire CEO who had thought himself invincible, was now vulnerable, his life hanging by a thread. She could feel the tension in the air as she observed his deteriorating condition. His face had grown even paler, and his hands were shaking uncontrollably. The faint smell of the rare dish he had eaten still lingered in the air, but Cassandra knew that the damage had already been done. She turned her attention to the rest of the restaurant. It was as if time itself had slowed down. The room was still bustling with guests, but now, every face was an echo of indifference. No one noticed the quiet urgency that filled the air around her. Cassandra, however, was not going to wait for someone else to act. She stepped back, scanning the restaurant to make sure no one else had seen what was happening. Her instincts kicked in. She knew this wasn't just another night at the restaurant. This wasn't just about serving drinks or clearing plates. This was life and death. With a quick glance at the bartender, she signaled him to stay put, and then she moved toward the back. She needed help, and fast. The kitchen staff was already preparing for the evening rush, unaware of the emergency unfolding in the dining area. Cassandra moved swiftly, her footsteps quiet but deliberate, her heart racing in her chest. She reached the kitchen and immediately pulled the head chef aside. "Chef, we've got a situation," she said in a low, urgent voice. The chef, a middle-aged man with a reputation for his calm demeanor, turned to her with a questioning look. "What is it, Cassandra?" he asked, his voice steady. "The dish we just served to Richard," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to remain calm. "It's poisoned. He's reacting badly." The chef's eyes widened, and without another word, he grabbed a nearby assistant and began to instruct him to prepare antidotes and take emergency measures. Meanwhile, Cassandra returned to Richard's table. He was still sitting there, his face drenched in sweat, his breathing shallow and rapid. He looked up at her, his gaze full of fear. He didn't speak, but his eyes pleaded for help. "You're going to be okay," she said, her voice calm but firm. She took his hand in hers, trying to reassure him, though she was far from certain herself. Cassandra knew that this wasn't just about saving Richard's life. It was about proving something more important, about showing that the worth of a person could never be measured by their wealth or status. As she held his hand, she realized how much she had been overlooked in her life. She had worked in this restaurant for years, but she had always been seen as nothing more than a server, someone invisible. But in this moment, her presence was the difference between life and death for Richard Kessler. The clock seemed to tick louder in the silence between them. Finally, the chef and his assistant rushed over with a solution. They worked quickly, administering the antidote to Richard, who was still shaking but now beginning to stabilize. Cassandra stood by, watching intently, her heart still racing. As the minutes passed, she saw Richard's condition improving. The color slowly returned to his face, and the tremors in his hands started to subside. His eyes met hers, and for the first time that evening, there was a flicker of recognition in them. He wasn't looking at her as just another waitress anymore. He was seeing her as someone who had saved his life. Cassandra wasn't sure what would happen next. She didn't know if Richard would thank her, or if anyone in the restaurant would even notice what had transpired. But for the first time in her life, she didn't need to be acknowledged by others. She had done what was right, and that was enough. Richard finally spoke, his voice hoarse but sincere. "Thank you," he said, his words soft but heavy with gratitude. Cassandra nodded, but before she could say anything in response, the restaurant manager arrived, his face full of concern. "What happened?" he asked, looking between Richard and Cassandra. "He's going to be fine," Cassandra said, her voice steady now. She turned to the manager. But it wasn't the food, it was the person who served it. The manager looked confused, unsure of what she meant. "I don't know what happened," she continued, her gaze never leaving Richard. "But I know one thing. Sometimes, the person you least expect is the one who saves you." As the minutes passed, the tension in the room slowly began to dissipate. Richard Kessler, the billionaire CEO, was still recovering from the shock, but his condition had stabilized. The color had returned to his face, and the tremors in his hands had stopped. He was no longer on the brink of collapse, but the emotional weight of what had just happened still hung heavily in the air. Cassandra stood beside him, her role as a waitress momentarily forgotten. She was now the reason Richard was still breathing. The other guests in the restaurant, who had been oblivious to the drama unfolding just moments before, began to notice the change in atmosphere. Whispers spread through the room, but no one dared to ask any questions. The staff, too, remained silent, unsure of how to address the situation. In the midst of it all, Cassandra found herself questioning everything. She had always been seen as just another invisible person, serving food and drinks, unnoticed and unimportant. Yet tonight, she had saved a life, without even thinking twice. The realization was both humbling and empowering. She was no longer the shadow she had always been. As Richard regained his composure, he looked at Cassandra with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. He had spent his entire life surrounded by power, control, and wealth, but now, in this moment, He found himself indebted to the woman he had barely noticed just hours ago. He reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I don't know what to say," he began, his voice still weak from the ordeal. "You saved my life." Cassandra looked at him, her expression unreadable. She had always been taught to stay silent, to serve without expectation, but this moment felt different. She had never imagined that her worth would be acknowledged in such a way, especially by someone like Richard Kessler. "You don't need to say anything," she replied quietly, her voice steady. "I just did what anyone would have done." But Richard knew that wasn't true. Anyone else in the restaurant that night could have ignored his plight, could have looked the other way as he struggled to breathe, but Cassandra hadn't. She had acted, without hesitation, without fear. Her actions had proven that kindness, courage, and dignity had the power to defy the expectations of those who saw her as nothing more than a waitress. As he sat there, still processing everything that had happened, Richard couldn't help but feel a deep sense of guilt. For years, he had been blinded by his wealth and status, believing that his success was a result of his own superiority. But now, faced with the reality of his own vulnerability, he saw the world in a new light. The person who had saved him was someone society had overlooked, someone who had been dismissed as insignificant. And yet, it was her strength, not his wealth, that had made the difference. He couldn't shake the thought. He had lived his entire life thinking that his money and power could buy him everything, except, it seemed, the one thing that truly mattered: respect. For the first time in years, Richard Kessler felt ashamed. But it was also in that moment that he realized something else. His life wasn't defined by his bank account or the business deals he made. It was defined by the people he interacted with, the way he treated others, and the choices he made. And right now, he knew he owed Cassandra more than just his thanks. The following morning, after the restaurant had emptied and the storm outside had cleared, Richard made a decision. He had spent hours reflecting on what had transpired, and he knew he couldn't let it go. Cassandra's actions had not only saved his life, but had also awakened something in him that he had long ignored: the need for compassion, for understanding, and for true connection. He picked up the phone and dialed a number, his fingers trembling slightly as he waited for the line to connect. When the voice on the other end answered, Richard didn't waste any time. "I need you to set up a meeting," he said, his tone firm yet thoughtful. "I want Cassandra to come to my office tomorrow. Tell her it's a matter of importance." He paused for a moment, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. "She deserves more than just a thank you. I need to make it right." Cassandra had no idea what was coming. She had finished her shift at the restaurant and was heading home, exhausted but content with the quiet life she had built. But when she received the call to meet with Richard Kessler, she was taken aback. She had never expected anything from him, let alone an invitation to his office. But there was something in the way he had spoken to her that made her realize this wasn't just about gratitude. It was about something deeper, something that transcended the usual boundaries of power and wealth. The next day, Cassandra stood in the lobby of KeslerTech, her heart racing as she waited to meet with Richard. She wasn't sure what to expect, but one thing was clear: this was a turning point in her life. As she was escorted to his office, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of nerves and excitement. She had never been inside a corporate building like this, and now she was about to meet the man who had once ignored her, only to now be the one to recognize her worth. When the door to Richard's office opened, he stood up from behind his desk and extended his hand to her. "Cassandra," he said, his voice sincere, "I don't know where to begin, but I owe you more than words. I want to offer you something that will change your life. And I hope you'll accept." Cassandra walked into the office of Richard Kessler, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined that she would be standing in the lobby of one of the most prestigious tech companies in the country, let alone meeting with the billionaire CEO himself. The elevator ride up had been quiet, almost too quiet, as her thoughts raced. She didn't know what to expect from this meeting. Was it just a thank you for saving his life? Or was there something more? Richard had made it clear in his phone call the night before that he wanted to offer her something significant. But what could a man like him offer someone like her? She had worked in the restaurant industry for years, always in the background, never seeking attention or recognition. She had learned to be invisible, to stay out of the spotlight. But that night, she had changed everything. She had saved Richard's life, and now, it seemed, he wanted to change hers. As the door to his office opened, Cassandra was greeted by the sight of Richard standing behind his desk. He looked different from the confident CEO she had seen in the restaurant. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a genuine warmth in his eyes. "Cassandra," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." She hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand, still unsure of what was happening. Richard motioned for her to sit down, and she carefully lowered herself into the chair across from him. The room was large, with sleek, modern furniture and a view of the city below. It was everything she had expected from a billionaire's office: cold, impersonal, and immaculate. But Richard was different. He wasn't the man who had looked at her like she was invisible. He wasn't the man who had dismissed her as just another waitress. No, today he was someone else entirely. He seemed to be struggling with what to say next, as if searching for the right words. "I don't know how to begin," Richard finally said, his voice quieter than usual. "You saved my life, Cassandra. There's nothing I can say that will ever be enough to express my gratitude." Cassandra's heart skipped a beat. She had expected him to thank her, but she hadn't expected this level of sincerity. She wasn't sure what to say in return. She had never been good at receiving praise, especially from someone like him. "It wasn't anything," she replied softly. "I just did what anyone would have done." Richard smiled, though there was something vulnerable in his expression. "No, Cassandra," he said, his voice firm now. "You did something extraordinary. You acted when no one else did. You saved me, and that's why I'm here. I want to offer you something that could change your life." Cassandra blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "I don't understand," she said slowly, still trying to wrap her head around the situation. Richard leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "I've spent my entire life building an empire," he said. "I've spent years making deals, accumulating wealth, and gathering power. But it's all meaningless if you don't have the people around you who matter. And in that moment, when I was lying there, you were the only person who mattered. You showed me something I've never had in my life: true humanity. And for that, I owe you everything." Cassandra sat in stunned silence, her mind racing. She had never expected this. She had never expected someone like Richard Kessler to see her as anything more than just a server, a person who existed in the background of his life. But here he was, offering her something that could change everything. "What do you want to offer me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Richard smiled again, this time with more certainty. "I want to offer you a position at KeslerTech," he said. "I've seen what you're capable of, Cassandra, and I want you to be a part of my team. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise it will be worth it." Cassandra's mind spun. A job at KeslerTech? The thought was almost incomprehensible. She had always worked in restaurants, had always been in the service industry, but this was something entirely different. This was an opportunity to change her life forever. But at the same time, she felt a wave of doubt wash over her. "But I don't have the qualifications," she said, shaking her head. "I've never worked in tech before. I don't even have a college degree." Richard shook his head. "That's not what matters to me, Cassandra. What matters is who you are and what you did. You're someone who sees the world differently. You acted with courage and kindness when others wouldn't. That's the kind of person I want on my team. And I believe you can do anything you set your mind to." Cassandra was silent for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always been told that she was not enough, that she wasn't the right fit, that she was too ordinary. But now, Richard was telling her that she was capable of extraordinary things. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond. All she knew was that this was a moment that could change everything. "I don't know what to say," she finally whispered. This is unbelievable." Richard's smile grew wider. "You don't have to say anything, Cassandra," he said. "Just think about it. Take your time. But I hope you'll accept." Cassandra nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice barely audible. As she stood to leave, Richard stood as well, extending his hand one last time. "Whatever you decide, Cassandra," he said, "know that you've already changed my life. And I'll always be grateful for that." Cassandra shook his hand once more, her mind spinning with the possibilities. As she left the office, she couldn't help but feel like she had just stepped into a new chapter of her life, one that she had never dreamed possible. Cassandra sat at her small kitchen table, the phone still buzzing beside her, the conversation from earlier echoing in her mind. Richard's offer to join KeslerTech was surreal, and yet, the weight of his words remained in the air like a heavy cloud. She hadn't expected any of this. She hadn't expected to be offered a chance to leave behind the life she had known. For years, she had worked in the shadows of others, never questioning her place in the world. But now, a door had opened, one that led to a future she had only dared to dream about. She picked up her phone and stared at it, her fingers hovering over the screen as she debated whether to call him back or not. The truth was, she had no idea what to do. She had always lived a life that was predictable. Wake up, work, take care of her responsibilities. But now, the offer to work in a tech company, to step into a world where she had no experience, no qualifications, felt like a leap into the unknown. The feeling was both thrilling and terrifying, but something deep inside her told her she had to take the chance. She couldn't let fear hold her back. She had already faced so much adversity in her life, from growing up with little to working twice as hard just to be seen. She wasn't going to let a lack of experience stop her now. With a deep breath, she dialed Richard's number, her heart pounding as she listened to the rings on the other end. When he answered, his voice was calm, almost as if he had been waiting for her call. "Cassandra," he said, his tone warm, "I'm glad you called. Have you thought about the offer?" Cassandra paused for a moment, trying to find the right words. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "I've thought about it, and I want to accept." Richard was silent for a moment, and she could hear the sound of him sitting back in his chair, processing her words. Then, with a quiet chuckle, he replied, "That's great to hear. I knew you would. I'll have my assistant send over the details for your onboarding. But there's one thing I want you to know, Cassandra. This isn't going to be easy. You're stepping into a world that's unlike anything you've ever experienced. But I believe in you." Those words hit her harder than she expected. "I believe in you." It was something Cassandra had never heard from anyone in her life. Not in school, not from any of the men she had worked for, and certainly not from anyone in her past. She had always been the one to believe in herself, even when the world didn't. But here was Richard, a man who had everything, telling her he believed in her. It was a humbling experience. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. This was her moment. After they finished the call, Cassandra sat in silence for a few moments, her mind still racing. She wasn't sure what to expect when she walked into KeslerTech's headquarters, but she knew that she was about to embark on a journey that would challenge her in ways she couldn't even imagine. The next day, Cassandra walked into the sleek, glass-walled building of KeslerTech. She had never been in a place like this before. The lobby was filled with people in tailored suits, walking quickly and purposefully. The air smelled like fresh coffee and ambition. She felt a pang of nervousness in her stomach, but she swallowed it down. She was here, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her now. Richard had already made arrangements for her first day. She was escorted through the modern halls of the office, passing sleek desks and quiet meeting rooms filled with people in deep conversation. She was given a tour of the company's headquarters, shown the high-tech facilities, and introduced to the team she would be working with. But as she walked through the office, her mind couldn't help but drift back to her roots, to the life she had left behind. The smell of the kitchen, the clatter of plates, the rush of serving customers. All of that was still fresh in her memory. But it felt like another life now, a life that she had outgrown. As she sat down at her new desk, Cassandra took a deep breath, ready to dive into her new role. She had no idea what the future would hold, but one thing was certain. She was no longer the invisible woman in the background. She was here, and she was ready to make her mark. Weeks went by, and Cassandra's transition into the tech world was anything but easy. She struggled at times, her lack of experience in the field showing through as she tried to navigate the complex systems and high expectations. But she pushed through, working late into the nights, reading everything she could get her hands on, learning, adapting. And with each passing day, she felt herself growing. She was no longer just a waitress, no longer just someone who blended into the background. She was a part of something bigger now, a part of a team that was pushing the boundaries of technology. Slowly, Richard began to notice the changes in her. At first, it was subtle, her growing confidence, her ability to take on more responsibility. But soon, it became clear to everyone. Cassandra was a force to be reckoned with. Her work ethic, her dedication, and her drive had set her apart, and before long, she was being offered more opportunities, more responsibilities. She had come a long way from the woman who had saved Richard's life in a restaurant, and she wasn't about to stop now. Cassandra had been working at KeslerTech for almost 3 months now, and every day felt like a new challenge. She had come a long way since her first day at the company, and the transformation had been remarkable. Her colleagues who had once doubted her abilities now saw her as a crucial part of the team. She had earned their respect, not with flashy credentials or a degree from a prestigious university, but through hard work, determination, and a relentless drive to prove herself. She had learned more in these 3 months than she had ever expected to learn in a lifetime. The systems were complex, the projects demanding, but she had a knack for solving problems, for thinking outside the box. The tech world was fast-paced, but Cassandra was keeping up. She was thriving. But despite the progress she had made, there were moments of doubt. She still sometimes felt like an imposter, unsure if she truly belonged in this world of highly educated professionals and elite executives. She had to remind herself constantly that she wasn't the same person who had walked into Richard's office months ago, unsure of her worth. She was stronger now, more confident. But as much as she had learned, there was still so much more to prove. It was on one of those late nights, while she was finishing up an analysis for an important project, that Richard approached her. He had always been supportive, but there was something different in his demeanor that evening. He stood in the doorway of her office, his expression unreadable. "Cassandra," he said, his voice softer than usual, "I need to talk to you about something." She looked up from her work, a little startled by his presence. "Of course, Richard. What's up?" "I've been following your progress closely," he began, walking into the room and sitting across from her. "And I have to say, I'm impressed. You've come a long way, and I can see the potential you have. But I need you to understand that this next step, this next project, will require everything you've got." Cassandra's heart skipped a beat. She had heard rumors about the next big project KeslerTech was planning, and she knew it was going to be a game changer. But she wasn't sure if she was ready. Richard continued, his tone serious but encouraging. "I'm offering you a lead role on the project. You'll be working closely with me and the executive team to develop something groundbreaking. But this isn't just about your technical skills. This is about your leadership, your ability to manage and inspire a team, your vision. It's about making an impact, Cassandra." She felt the weight of his words sink in. This was more than she had ever dreamed of. Leading a team, working on a project that could change the future of the company, and potentially the tech industry. But with that opportunity came immense pressure. Could she really handle it? "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Cassandra admitted, her voice quieter now. "I've never led a project like this before. I've always been just a part of the team." Richard smiled, a knowing smile, as if he had anticipated her response. "That's exactly why I'm offering this to you. You've been just a part of the team because you've been waiting for someone to give you the chance to step up. But you don't need permission anymore, Cassandra. You've already proven you have what it takes. This is your time." His words hit her like a revelation. All the doubts she had carried with her, all the insecurities, suddenly felt insignificant. Richard wasn't just offering her a position. He was offering her the opportunity to prove to herself that she could be more than what she had ever imagined. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice filled with newfound confidence. "I'll do it." Richard leaned back in his chair, a satisfied look crossing his face. "I knew you would. I'll have my assistant set up the details for your new role. It's going to be tough, but I'm confident you're ready." As Richard left the room, Cassandra sat back in her chair, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. The journey she had started months ago had led her here, to this pivotal moment. She was no longer the woman who had been overlooked and dismissed. She was a leader, ready to take on whatever came next. She smiled to herself, realizing that this was just the beginning. The world was wide open, and she was finally stepping into the life she had always deserved. Cassandra's new role at KeslerTech wasn't just a promotion, it was a test that she had been waiting for her entire life. The first day of the new project was a whirlwind. Richard had made it clear from the beginning. This project would push her beyond anything she had ever done before. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt energized. This was her moment, and she was determined to make it count. She spent the first few weeks in constant motion, working late into the night, attending meetings, collaborating with her new team. The project was big, bigger than anything she had imagined. The stakes were high, and the pressure was mounting. But with each new challenge, Cassandra's confidence grew. She found herself stepping up, making decisions, and leading the team with a clarity and purpose that surprised even her. Her technical skills were sharp, and her ability to manage the team was something she had never fully realized. It was as if all the years of being overlooked, all the years of working quietly behind the scenes, had been preparing her for this. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the weight of the project felt too heavy, when the responsibility seemed too much to bear. But those moments were fleeting. Cassandra had learned to trust herself, to believe in her abilities. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't just the woman who had saved Richard's life. She was a leader, a problem solver, and she was ready for whatever came next. As the project progressed, Richard's faith in her only grew. He was hands-off, but supportive, always offering guidance when needed, but allowing her the freedom to lead her team. There was a shift in the office. People began to look at Cassandra differently. The whispers that once surrounded her, about her lack of experience, her status as a newcomer, had quieted. Now, she was respected. She was trusted. She was the one people went to when they needed answers. It wasn't always easy, but every time she faced a challenge, she rose to the occasion. There was one particular moment that stood out to her. The team had hit a major roadblock. The deadline was fast approaching, and the solution seemed impossible to find. Tensions were running high, and the pressure to deliver was weighing heavily on everyone. Cassandra knew that this was the moment that would define the project. She gathered the team together, and, in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't just about finding the technical solution anymore. It was about inspiring the team, about showing them that they could do it. She reminded them of how far they had come, how they had already overcome so much. "We've done the impossible before," she said, her voice steady but full of conviction. "And we can do it again. Trust me." The room went silent for a moment, and then, slowly, the team got to work. They dug in, collaborating like never before, their energy renewed by Cassandra's belief in them. Hours later, they found the solution. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but they had done it. Cassandra's heart swelled with pride. She had led them through the storm, and they had come out victorious. That night, as she sat at her desk, reflecting on everything she had accomplished, Richard walked in. He stood in the doorway, his usual confidence replaced with something more personal. "You did it," he said, his voice low but full of admiration. "You saved the project." Cassandra looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "It wasn't just me," she said, standing up and meeting his gaze. "It was the team. We did it together." Richard smiled, his eyes softening. "But you led them. You stepped up when it mattered. That's the mark of a great leader." Cassandra felt a rush of emotion, but she quickly pushed it aside. This was what she had worked for, what she had fought for. It was a moment of validation, of recognition, and it meant more to her than anything else. As Richard left her office, Cassandra stood there for a moment, taking in everything that had happened. She had come a long way from the woman who had been invisible, the woman who had been underestimated. She had worked her way up, not just in her career, but in her own self-belief. She was no longer defined by the job she had, by the title she held, or by what others thought of her. She was defined by her actions, by the way she led, by the way she rose to every challenge. And that was the greatest accomplishment of all. The road ahead was still long, and there would be more challenges to face, but Cassandra was no longer afraid. She was ready, ready to lead, ready to make a difference, ready to change the world in her own way. She had already proven to herself that she was capable of greatness. And now, it was time for everyone else to see it too. Cassandra sat in her office late one evening, staring at the numbers on her screen. The project she had worked so hard on was finally coming to a close, and the results were better than anyone had anticipated. KeslerTech was about to make a huge breakthrough, and she had been a crucial part of making it happen. Her success was no longer just a matter of self-worth. It was a matter of proving that someone like her, someone who had started at the bottom, could rise to the top. As the team gathered in the conference room to present their findings, Cassandra felt a rush of excitement. It wasn't just about the numbers or the data, it was about what those numbers represented. The work they had done would change the way people thought about technology. It would revolutionize the industry, and she had played a key role in it. Richard stood at the front of the room, addressing the team with his usual confidence. "We've made it," he said, his voice steady. This project is going to be a game changer. But none of this would have been possible without the hard work and dedication of our team. And Cassandra, you've been integral to our success. You've proven that leadership isn't about titles, it's about action. It's about making a difference when it matters the most. Cassandra's heart skipped a beat. She had been hearing those words more and more lately, but hearing them from Richard, in front of the team, was different. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now, it was finally paying off. As the presentation concluded, the team erupted into applause, and Richard turned to Cassandra, his expression full of pride. "You've done it," he said quietly. "You've changed everything." The words hit her like a wave. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It was about the transformation she had undergone, the journey she had taken to get here. Cassandra had come a long way from the woman who had stood in that restaurant months ago, unsure of her place in the world. Now, she was a leader, someone who had earned the respect and admiration of her peers. The evening continued with a celebratory dinner, the mood light and filled with excitement. Cassandra couldn't help but smile as she looked around the room, at the people she had come to know and respect. She had found her place here, not just as a member of the team, but as someone who could lead, inspire, and create change. As the night went on, Richard pulled her aside, away from the hustle and bustle of the celebration. "Cassandra," he said, his voice quiet, "I've been thinking about what you've accomplished. You've not only proved yourself to the team, but you've proved something to me as well. You've proven that it's not about where you start, it's about where you end up. And I want to help you get even further. I want you to take on more responsibility here. Lead more teams. This is just the beginning." Cassandra was taken aback. She had always been focused on the present, on getting through each challenge as it came. But now, Richard was offering her more. More opportunities, more trust, more leadership. It was everything she had ever wanted, and yet, it felt surreal. "I don't know what to say," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. "I never thought I'd be here, in this position. I never thought I could do this." Richard smiled, his expression soft. "You've done it, Cassandra. You've shown everyone what you're capable of. And now, I'm asking you to show yourself what you can achieve. You're not done yet." The next few weeks were a blur for Cassandra. She took on more projects, more teams, and with each new responsibility, she felt herself grow. She had become the person she always hoped to be. She had found her voice, her place, her purpose. But with all the success, there were still moments of doubt. She still questioned if she was truly capable of all that was being asked of her. One afternoon, as she walked through the office, she overheard two of her colleagues talking. They were discussing the latest project, and one of them mentioned how impressed they were with Cassandra's leadership. For a moment, Cassandra stood still, listening. She had worked so hard to get here, and hearing others recognize her efforts filled her with pride. But it wasn't just about their recognition. It was about her own self-worth. She had proven to herself that she could achieve greatness, no matter where she started. And that, more than anything, was what kept her going. As the weeks turned into months, Cassandra found herself thriving in ways she had never imagined. She led teams, made key decisions, and earned the respect of everyone around her. She was no longer the woman who had been dismissed as just another waitress. She was someone who made an impact, someone who changed the course of KeslerTech, and someone who had finally realized her own potential. She had proven that no matter where you come from, no matter how many obstacles stand in your way, you have the power to change your own story. And that was the greatest accomplishment of all. Cassandra stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out over the city skyline as the sun set behind the buildings. The light cast a warm glow across the streets below, and for a moment, she allowed herself to reflect on everything she had accomplished. A year had passed since she first stepped into the world of KeslerTech, and the transformation in her life had been nothing short of extraordinary. She had gone from being an invisible waitress to becoming a respected leader in the tech industry. The journey had been challenging, filled with moments of self-doubt and uncertainty, but it had also been filled with triumphs, both big and small. And now, as she stood at the top of her career, she could hardly believe how far she had come. Cassandra had just finished a meeting with the executive team, where she had successfully presented her vision for the next phase of KeslerTech's growth. The room had been filled with nods of approval, and Richard had looked at her with pride in his eyes. She had earned her place at the table. And it wasn't just her technical skills that had earned her that respect. It was her leadership, her ability to inspire others, and her unwavering belief in her own potential. She had learned to trust herself, to take risks, and to step into roles that once seemed impossible. But the real reward, Cassandra realized, wasn't the recognition, the promotions, or even the salary. It was the feeling of being truly seen, truly valued, for who she was and what she brought to the table. She had proven to herself that her worth was not determined by her past or by what others had expected of her. It was defined by her actions, her drive, and her willingness to keep moving forward, even when the path was unclear. As the wind picked up and a chill settled in the air, Cassandra took a deep breath, savoring the quiet moment. She had come to understand that success wasn't just about reaching the top. It was about the journey, the lessons learned along the way, and the person you became in the process. Looking out over the city, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was no longer the woman who had doubted herself, who had felt small and invisible. She had become someone who had made a difference, someone who had changed not only her own life, but the lives of those around her. And that, she knew, was the true measure of success. As she turned to go back inside, her phone buzzed with a message from Richard. She smiled as she read it. "Cassandra, you've been an inspiration to all of us. You've changed everything. Let's continue making history." His words were a reminder of how far they had come together and how much they had accomplished as a team. But more importantly, they were a reminder that her journey was far from over. There was still so much to do, so much to learn, and so many more challenges to face. But now, Cassandra knew that she was ready for whatever came next. She had earned her place in the world, and she was just getting started. As she walked back into her apartment, she looked at the skyline one last time, knowing that this was just the beginning of an even bigger chapter in her life. With determination in her heart and a sense of purpose guiding her, Cassandra was ready to continue her journey, to lead, to inspire, and to make an even greater impact in the world. In this powerful Black story, a woman's journey from being an invisible waitress to becoming a respected leader in the tech industry proves that anyone can rise above their circumstances with determination and belief in themselves. Follow the inspiring journey of Cassandra, who not only saved the life of a billionaire CEO, but also proved that success is not defined by your past or the expectations others place on you. This Black story highlights the importance of resilience, the power of self-belief, and the transformative impact of leadership. As Cassandra steps into a new role at KeslerTech, she faces challenges and doubts, but ultimately overcomes them to make her mark in a world that once seemed out of reach. This Black story is a testament to the power of perseverance and the idea that anyone, regardless of background, can achieve greatness. As Cassandra's journey unfolds, it becomes clear that her story is not just about success, but about changing the world around her and inspiring others to do the same. This Black story reminds us that our potential is limitless when we embrace our true selves and take action toward our dreams.